Excuse me, Your Worship, you're live whenever you're ready to go.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll give Councillor Madigan, I've got 4:59, so we'll give him a minute or two and then we'll go. Perfect timing. All right, Council, it's 5 o'clock and I will call the council meeting to order of March 22nd, 2021. Beautiful sunny day out there. And for those that have elected to join us, thank you very much. And hopefully we'll make it worth your while. Today we acknowledge that council is located on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. And we will start off with the motion to adopt the agenda, that the content of the council agenda for March 22, 2021 be adopted as amended, and there's an additional item, 11.2.2, Economic Support and Recovery Task Force Survey Results, and we have Foster Williams, the Vice Chair, here to present that to us today. And unless there's objections from council, I will be pulling that forward so that we will have that during our community announcements so that we can get Foster in and out and also get this report at a time when we have everyone's attention. So can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Hamlin, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position as we progress. Okay, Councillor Doherty.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I will, when we review the minutes for the Development and Operations Standing Committee and the deputation from the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust Foundation, I will declare a disqualifying conflict of interest, as the trust will be asking for support for the town, from the town.
Okay, thank you. Any others, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position as we move through, just let us know. That brings us to item 4, adoption of the minutes. So the motion is that the minutes of the council meeting held March 15, 2021 be approved as presented. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Madigan and Councillor Comey. Are there any errors or omissions, Council, before I call the vote? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Thank you. Council, is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on then to item 6. Oh, wait, I think we're missing a community announcements. There it is, item 5. Community announcements, and I will start with you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I have nothing this evening.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I do have something I'd like to say. It was just about a year ago. Of course, we've been all talking about how we've been dealing with COVID for a year, and clearly everyone is very tired of lockdowns and so on. But I'd like to take a minute just to talk about success, because I think that we don't spend enough time thinking about what a good job we've actually done here in Ontario, here in Collingwood, and here in Canada when it comes to battling the pandemic. And just a brief statistic. Our cousins in the United States have 1,671 people per million who have died of COVID. We here in Canada have 597 people per million population who have died of COVID. That's 3.5 times more in the US. They have 91,000 people per million who have contracted COVID, and we have 24,000 per million population who have contracted COVID. And so I think we need to spend some time once in a while thinking about, yes, our losses, which have been massive and unacceptable, but the successes that we have had and the good work that we've all done, and we're in the home stretch. There are vaccines coming. And if we can just hold tight for these last few months, we can get through this. And that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. A shout out for our population, our residents. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councillor McLeod. You know, I was able, my children's great-grandmother, who lived in London during World War II, and it was an immigrant to both Trinidad and Canada, was vaccinated last week, as were both my parents. It was an incredibly wonderful moment to honor our scientists and our medical professionals, and a great relief to our family. I think we should take joy in everyone's excitement over having loved ones vaccinated. So absolutely, I'm glad you mentioned that. I would like to take this opportunity to thank a resident, Mr. Mark Arnold. He also happens to be a firefighter. He did something really wonderful in our community. He did that sort of thing where he saw a problem and he took action. One of our developers had sort of an issue with their trailer that had sort of come apart, and all this insulation, blown insulation, went down all along the Hamilton Drain Trail. It was getting into the water. And just one of his days off on a weekend, he got 5 contractor bags and he personally filled them with the debris and cleaned it all up. And I would just like to thank him for doing that. That really makes us a community, and we really appreciate that. So thank you to Mark. And also, it's probably very hard to see, I have a very wee bee pinned to my collar this evening, courtesy of Pollinate Collingwood. And Mr. Mayor, I believe they've left one for all council, including you. It is a thank you gift as part of Collingwood becoming Bee City, Canada. These little bees are made of organic wool by members of a blind community in Toronto. And I'm sure we are all going to treasure them. They're very delicate and very lovely. So congratulations to staff and the town, and a perfect day to think about our pollinators. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Comey. And I had a nice chat with Jessica Laird this morning as she presented a certificate and a poster to the town. And I do have one of those beautiful bees for each one of you, and I'll put them in your mail slots so you can pick them up. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson, and what a beautiful day we had today. My community announcement will be an apology. I have to leave early tonight. I have a medical appointment in Barrie, so I'll be leaving at 6 tonight. So I have full faith that council will make the proper decisions, and I do apologize for the late. I totally forgot about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight, I would just like to express congratulations to our Parks, Rec and Culture staff who won not 1, not 2, but 3 top awards from Festival and Events Ontario for 3 of our events that were held this fall and winter. So the Art of Winter, the Art Crawl, and Live and Original. And this is just a great example of how our Parks, Rec and Culture continue to think outside the box and make lemonade out of lemons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty, and I'll echo those congratulations. The Art of Winter actually was our last live event, so that just shows you how far back we go, celebrating our little over a year and with the COVID crisis, but certainly the nimbleness and turning around and creating virtual events that were award-winning is a testament to the resiliency of our staff. Councillor Berwin.
Nothing for me tonight, thanks.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing this evening. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson.
Okay, Councillor Hamlin.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Okay, I just want to echo the earlier comments about the great work our community is doing in this battle against COVID. We aren't yet out of the woods, but we are certainly have light at the end of the tunnel, and it's great to see this beautiful weather. The health unit announced today that starting today, they are booking appointments for vaccination for adults that are 75 and older. So and they've got the provincial portal up and running. And if there are others who require a vaccine or qualify for the vaccine for other reasons, they're asked to contact the health unit directly through the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit website. So please, those that are eligible, get out and get your vaccination. And we continue to work hard to keep our infection rate down, and we will soon be there. And so with that being said, then I am going to ask Adam, is Adam going to introduce Foster Williams, our chair, vice chair of the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force that banded together very quickly and got a survey done, and Foster's here tonight with us to share the results of the survey and the comments from that great committee. So with that being said, I will turn it over to you, Foster.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be back. Nice to see you folks all again. Positive news to report. And do we have the slides show up? Thank you. All righty. Next slide, please. So at your request, we put the team back together, the band, and we started to take a look at a few things and have a continued relationship with all members of the team. So using a technique tried and true, I put together a survey and issued it to the team with specific intent of focusing on the 6 items that had already identified as needing action. So next slide, please. I'd like to share with you my metrics, if you will. It's for those of you that like surveys and statistics and data. We use survey from 0. I did not see the updates. I did not hear any news of progress. I did not see any results of progress. Up to 3, which would be a fantastic score. I saw the updates. I heard news of progress. I saw the results of progress. So using a scale like this, we avoid what's called central tendency effect, and we don't have people picking the middle number. So it forces a choice. Next slide, please. On the economic impacts metrics, I know you folks are using it well, and I've seen the data myself multiple times. While not all team members had seen the economic impact data, it was people were generally aware that the tool is being used. And I understand that you're taking a look at very meaningful metrics. You're looking for ways to add metrics to the table, and it's reliable data that you use for decision making. And I also understand that it has been a very accurate reflection of what you see and hear and observe economically in our community. So that tells me that it's a real good tool, and I have an expectation that you'll find ways to enhance it over time. I would like to tip my hat to John Gillum, who is a member of our team and continues to be quite supportive of this initiative. Next slide, please. So business support and recovery services, this is an excellent score, 2.6 out of 3. By far, we see a lot of good benefit here, good uptake on provincial and federal support programs. Vast majority of local businesses continue to operate. Some of us who drive around in other communities see the impact of COVID, and it's not as evident here in our precious town. Generally, there was very good uptake on the digitization, Digital Main Street initiative, and that I personally took advantage of that. That's an exceptional service, if you will. But one thing we did discover is it's evident that many businesses don't recognize that the SBEC and BDC are actually town-operated services, and it may just be wise to highlight that to the business community. Next slide, please. Business tourism and relaunch marketing got a good score here. Obviously, it got toned down due to the necessity of the situation. Would like to see more shop local and get out campaigns. Those that were done were well executed and we're very supportive of small businesses, so we're happy to see that. Tourism business impact may have had some unintended consequences in terms of overcrowding at outdoor recreation and attraction facilities, and obviously demand for housing. Visits did not necessarily translate into revenue for local businesses, and there are many creative ideas that we've submitted that we think will assist with this over time. Next slide, please. So I personally want to tip my hat to the people who have put on a lot of these events. I've been very aware of them and participated in some. Sometimes you get inclement weather and low turnout, but people who put these events on are really the hometown heroes. So there are many terrific events that have gone on. The list is here for you to see. And one of our colleagues who is very involved in the arts community said that it was a tremendous help to both the participating artists and visitors in terms of a mental health day and finally getting a chance to be out and seeing each other at a safe distance. And for those of you who feel strongly about this as I do, this is a form of community therapy when we can get people together and get outside and take advantage of each other's hospitality. The one tip I would offer as a businessman is think low cost, high value, and do as many things as you can. Next slide, please. Shop local incentive. This one we think needs improvement. One of the things that came out when we discussed this specific item is that you folks and us folks on the team were all in support of this, trying to find a creative way to encourage this, to make it happen. There's obviously some impediments in the way, everything from a potentially high price tag to operational dilemmas and maybe some risk reward uncertainty. However, we would encourage you to come back to this and think about it creatively. And there were a few ideas that we put together that we've submitted to CIO Skinner and Brennan Kenny that could be capitalized on. So just please give it some more thought. A couple things that did come out though that I'd like to highlight is shopping local is not just about bars and restaurants and food and beverage services as well as shops. I think when I think shop local, I think it's much bigger. And so there was some creative thinking about how do you encourage shopping local between businesses. And that's something that might be an initiative to encourage. Tours of major employers, talking about major employers in town, what are their products and services, try and really highlight that to cross-fertilize, if you will. For those of you who are better at this than me, you will know that a manufacturing dollar has a much greater whipsaw benefit in a community than a retail dollar. So anything we can do to encourage local consumption of manufactured or new built product is highly valuable to the community. Couple other things in this area, we contributed 2 new team members to the BIA, Kathy Saunderson and Brandon Houston. And I understand that the relationship between the BIA and the town council has greatly improved. I'm sure that they've had something to do with that. So I just want to recognize their contribution. Next slide, please. So I know Dean, and I have a lot of confidence in him, and he talked about the importance of this early on. And we think that this continues to need work. It just may be that good work is taking place. We're just not hearing about it. So there are some very valuable contributions. I'd just like to highlight one area, the PPE subcommittee. The local Rotary Club and specifically David Hearn, they did exceptional work. And again, I think that that's a hugely positive example of hometown heroes stepping up and helping out when it's in need. The group as a whole has one continuing lingering concern, and I know that you all have the same concern, and that's affordable housing. It's very important. I think of it in strata. So strata 1 jobs are those community service jobs that are going on in restaurants, bars, retail, you name it. We can have a wonderful community, but unless we have built up the ability for people to make strata 1 income to find housing, we've got a problem on our hands. And so I know it's important to you. The task force think it's important as well. There's more work to be done on community resiliency. People are struggling with the basic needs, cost of housing, not affordable rental housing, lack of affordable daycare. We highlighted all these things in our detailed report to CAO Skinner, but much is being done. Perhaps it's just a need to improve on communications, but I know Dean very well, and he's a very competent guy to lead this sort of thing. Next slide, please. Implications and next step, continue to employ the dashboard. Look for ways to improve it. Data, the more data you have, the better decision making you as a group can make. So please keep pushing for that. Improve communication so people know the SCEC BDC is a town organized, supported group and can supply comprehensive one-stop shopping for all business needs. Just another touch point here is make sure that all the bankers and all the accountants in town know about the services provided here. Because if you're a small business person like I am, you're hearing from your accountant and your banker regularly. And if you're looking for help and they'll know you are, they can refer you to this service. Continue to prioritize the coordination and implementation of social services. That roundtable that was talked about earlier is very important to continue with. We think there's real leverage opportunities there. Special events must focus on activities that drive visitors towards our retail and consumer sector, including weekend-long events to encourage accommodation, consumption, that sort of thing. And I know that it's a little bit of a challenge right now with COVID still being in our backyard, but thinking creatively and innovatively over time is going to be effective for our long-term health and needs and support of our business community. One of the things that Councillor Jeffrey did early on in the relationship that we built up within the team was talked about how she is a member of a national group of towns, communities, counties, I don't know what it is all, but, and with Brennan said something I found quite humorous the other day. We need to R&D, rip off and duplicate from many other communities. So we not only want to gift through Councillor Jeffrey to the communities out there our good intentions and our good work that we've done, we'd also like to acquire some. So my call to action for all council members is when you hear of other people doing good things, please bring it back to the table because we want to capitalize on it. I don't believe there's anything hugely new that we came out of our survey. I will tell you that question number 2 of the survey, after we evaluated the how did we feel we had done on our 6 initial initiatives, question number 2, I called it, if you owned the town, specifically what additional actions would you take? That generated 21 items, 21 different ideas. Some of them were overlapping, but we've handed these off to Brennan and Adam and CO Skinner, and they're all built upon of the 6 core items. And I'm quite confident that things are in very good hands with those folks. I've had an opportunity to meet Brennan and discuss his background with him and what his ideas are. And it's very refreshing. Next slide, please. So this is not for me, but I will say on the second line, the CD Advisory Task Force really is standing down at this time. We think you folks have done an excellent job, but there's more to do, but it's really the same stuff, doing more of it. And the ideas we've contributed this time around are tabled, if you will, and always know we're here to help. There's not a person on the team that is not committed. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Foster, thank you for that great presentation. Council, are there any questions or comments for Foster and the other members of the Task Force and Recovery Committee? Councillor Hamlin.
I'd just like to, I guess, two things. Firstly, just thank you, Foster. That was very informative, and really appreciate some of your ideas. That one about affordable daycare, I'm sure, is music to a lot of people's ears because, as we know, parents can't both go to work if there's a child with nobody able to do any care. I also really appreciated your comment about making sure our businesses locally know what other businesses locally have to offer. And I have been approached by a business before Christmas who was looking, I think it was for medical recycling, medical waste recycling. And I, of course, I don't know any business that does that, but I called Martin, and Martin did know someone. But I think what you're saying is take it another step. Well, of course, Martin's not here, but should there be a directory? Should we be highlighting this some way to our business community? Because the needs I've come to realize of our business community are huge, and they don't have to go to Newmarket or Richmond Hill to get what they need. We have so much of it here. So anyway, thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am. What I'd say is you don't know what you don't know. And so if there's a creative way for us to start cross-culturally promoting local manufacturing and not evident businesses, I think that's very healthy for our community. So it's just to build on what you said, man.
Thank you. Council, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Foster, thanks for answering the call, and please pass along our regards to each and every one of the committee members. I know they spent time and energy filling in those surveys and providing excellent information for us. So thank you for your team for being there yet again.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
That brings us to item 6, the consent agenda. There are 5 items on the consent agenda today, and the resolution is that council hear and receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. Item 6.1, proclamation, Purple Day for Epilepsy Awareness, which is March 26, 2021. 6.2, proclamation, Rotary Club of Collingwood-South Georgian Bay Day. It's Rotary for Youth Day on April 1st, 2021. And we had the flag raising today. 6.3 is a proclamation, Dig Safe Month, which is April 2021. 6.4, Township of Glengarry, Provincial Vaccine Rollout. And 6.5, Ontario Fire Marshal Fire Safety Grant Announcement. So can I get a mover and a seconder, please, to get this on the floor? Councillor Madigan and Councillor Jeffrey, all in favor of receiving the consent agenda? That is passed unanimously. Thank you, Councillor. Are there any items that you would like to pull? Seeing none, I know we have a motion for item 6.5. So I will read that in and look for a mover and a seconder. It's be it resolved that council approve the fire safety grant through the Ministry of the Solicitor General and the Office of the Ontario Fire Marshal in the amount of $9,900 to assist the Collingwood Fire Department in addressing challenges associated with training and virtual inspections due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor Doherty. Any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to item 7, a standing committee report, the Development and Operations Services Committee meeting of March 8, 2021. And all of these items were passed unanimously. So I will read it in and I'll look for a mover and a seconder. And the motion is the council receive. Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. So item 1 in that list, deputation from the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust Foundation, I'd like to have severed
Certainly. So I'll pull that out and we'll deal with the other items first, and then you can remove
And
yourself.
thank you, Worship. And there's one other item, the minutes of the meeting indicate that I declared a non-disqualifying conflict. I declared a disqualifying conflict.
Okay, I see the clerk nodding, so she'll make that change to the minutes.
Thank you.
All right. So the resolution is that council received the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held March 8, 2021, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. Item 2, PW 2021-4 Wastewater Performance Report. The recommendation is to endorse the 2020 Annual Wastewater Performance Report. Item 3, PW 2021-6 Accessible Transit Services. The recommendation is to extend the current accessible transit operations contract with Canadian Red Cross and direct staff to negotiate a contract extension with Ace Cabs to provide accessible on-demand services until July 31, 2022, including an additional $15,000 for 2021. Item 4, P 2021-3 part lot control exemption bylaw, blocks 255 to 269 and blocks 283 and 84, Summit View Phase 2. Recommendation is to enact and pass a part lot control exemption bylaw to allow the creation of 42 lots consisting of blocks 255 to 269, Plan 51M 1170. For semi-detached dwellings and blocks 283 and 284, Plan 51M 1170 for townhouse dwellings within Summit View Plan subdivision. Item 5, P 2021-6 459 Hume Street, Collingwood General and Marine Site Plan Control Minor Adjustment for Storage Building. And the recommendation is to approve the processing of the proposed storage building for the Collingwood General and Marine Hospital as a minor adjustment to a site plan control agreement, including site plan development drawings with conditions. And the final item, item 6, is Collingwood Heritage Committee meeting held February 22, 2021. Recommendation to refer the request to increase the Heritage Tax Relief Program amount to staff for further review and inclusion in the 2022 budget. And the final item, is requests for redesignation 774 and 776 Mountain Road, Mountainside Sports, and 4 Elm Street. Recommendation that the request for redesignation be referred to staff for review in the official plan update. And since all of these were passed unanimously, unless the council wants to pull one of these items for a change in direction, I'm going to call the vote, and then once they're received, then I will give you an opportunity to comment on any of those specific items. And I think the mover would be the chair, Councillor Hamlin. You're able to move that, and our vice chair, Councillor Jeffrey. All right. So I've got a mover and a second. Then all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Council, are there any items that you'd like to pull for comment? Seeing none, then we'll deal with the Silver Creek wetlands signage, and so Councillor Doyle, I'll allow you to sign off. So the recommendation then is the council receive the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held March 8, 2021, and hereby approve the following recommendation. Number 1, proposed replacement of Silver Creek wetlands signage, and the recommendation is in support of an in-kind support for sign replacement. Unless there are any questions or comments, then I'm going to call the vote. Then all in favor? And that is approved unanimously. Thank you. Sarah, if you can please call Councillor Doherty back in. And that brings us to the next item, which is 7.2.1, which is the bylaw, which enacts the part lot control, which we dealt with under the Operations and Developments Standing Committee reports. So the bylaw reads that bylaw number 2021-10 being a bylaw to exempt a portion of land from the part lot control provisions of the Planning Act, blocks 255 to 269, 283 and 284, Summit View Phase 2, be enacted and passed this 15th day of March. I'll have that moved by Chair Hamlin and seconded by Vice Chair Jeffrey, if they're agreeable to that. And if you are, then we will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. This brings us to item 8, staff reports. Item 8.1, C 2021 Committee and Board Governance Review. And I'll pass it over to Clerk Almus to introduce it, and then we'll get the motion on the floor. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is an update from the report that was presented on February 1st regarding changes to the committee and board governance structures, as well as some updates to the procedural bylaw pertaining to roles of members of committees or boards and members of department heads and staff. The report went to council on February the 16th. We had an Engage site set up. We sent out some direct emails to all of our existing committee and board members for participation in that. We also had feedback through that survey and direct feedback from the BIA. So I'll just review some of the survey results. There wasn't a great uptake regarding the responses. However, we had 5 significant questions. So 100% of the respondents did support the idea of having breakout subcommittees of various advisory committees, even if they had quorum of the main body, knowing that they couldn't make any decisions or provide any directions or do any approvals that were within the scope of their parent body. 63% of respondents supported the recommendation to proceed with the pilot project for the external agencies sitting as non-voting members on 3 of our potential committees. So that being the Museum Advisory, the Trail and Accessibility Advisory, the Heritage Committee, the Accessibility Committee, and the Museum Committee. 50% of respondents supported the recommendation that the membership of the Heritage Committee be reduced to 5 members versus 7 members. They have been operating with 5 members for over half of a year at this point, and it's been very successful. 62.5% of respondents supported the recommendation that the downtown BIA member of the Heritage Committee not be a voting member. However, this was presented in before the BIA Board of Management, and they did submit a resolution strongly disagreeing to that recommendation. And 50% of respondents did not support agency representation having voting rights at committee meetings. However, there was 12.5% that were undecided. So seeing as the biggest item that appeared to evoke a lot of discussion was around the BIA appointment, we did do some further research, and we wanted to take a look at those that provided deputations or had applications before the Heritage Committee. So out of 2019 and 2020, there was approximately 35 applications or deputations before that committee, in which 27 of them were actually from within the boundaries of the BIA. We also referenced the existing establishing bylaw for the Heritage Committee, and the citizen memberships are to represent the following skill set or interest areas, and that includes the heritage conservation, historical research, historical building materials and techniques, but it is not a requirement of the individual that is representing the specific heritage, that is representing the BIA on the Heritage Committee. We also had further discussion with our Integrity Commissioner because there was concern around potential conflicts of interest. So the Integrity Commissioners confirmed that the membership of the BIA to the Heritage Committee as a voting member is really a governance issue and would not be captured as a general conflict of interest as they are representing their body. However, there is potential for conflict of interest of individuals, but they would just have to declare it at the meeting. And we also referenced the specific section 2 within the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act in the staff report. Members of the public, the ACO and staff have identified the importance of Heritage Committee representing eligible areas with a heritage interest. However, staff believe that the BIA Board of Management have been good partners with respect to heritage conservation and have shown to have both respect for heritage as well as the interest of their membership. So if council decides to proceed with maintaining status quo on our Heritage Advisory Committee, we're still recommending that they maintain the number of voting representatives as 5. There is an additional recommendation that we're also identifying within the report if the recommendation is approved as presented, which indicates that the pilot agencies that would be offered the non-voting rights would be determined at the discretion of the department head resource as well as the chair of the committee. And if there is any potential conflicts or any concerns, then it would come back before council for consideration. So that is our update.
Thank you. So I think what we'll do then is get the recommendation on the floor, and then we'll open up for questions or comments. So the recommendation reads as follows: be it resolved that staff report C 2021-3A, committee and board governance review be received, and that council support the recommendations contained herein and enact and pass amending bylaw 2021-11. So if I could get a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Madigan and Councillor Berman, and I will open the floor to questions or comments. Council, Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor McLeod. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Perhaps through you to the clerk, but also to my colleagues around the table. The understanding that I have is that we've got this before us this evening for consideration, but within the report itself, and specifically on page 3 of 24, as it relates to the BIA and the Heritage Committee, there is an alternate recommendation. And I would like an opportunity to perhaps table that alternate recommendation and then speak to the merits of inserting it as a substitute option.
All right. So then the ultimate recommendation, I will read it in, and then I've got its mover, and so I will look for a seconder. So in place of the second paragraph of the motion on the floor, the alternate would read as follows: and that council support the recommendations contained herein, with the exception that the BIA Board of Management representative continue as a voting member of the Heritage Committee, comprised of 5 voting members, and enact and pass amending bylaw 2021-11. So the Deputy Mayor has moved that amendment. Is there a seconder? Councillor Madigan. So we've got the amendment on the floor, and I will open the floor then to questions or comments on that. I do have Councillor McLeod, and then I will go you, Councillor Doherty. Go ahead, Councillor McLeod.
My comments are not about this particular piece of business. So if we're debating the amendment, I'm happy to do that first. Okay. All right. Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would support the notion of, excuse me, the BIA representative having a vote on the Heritage Committee. However, I feel very strongly that that representative should also have the same qualifications that we are asking the rest of the voting members of that committee to have. And that is to say, an interest and some knowledge and experience of heritage preservation, heritage techniques, and so forth. I feel that without that knowledge or experience, you run the risk of having that member making decisions for little more than political basis. And so I would like to ask if we could amend the motion to add that the BIA representative should have qualifications similar or equal to the rest of the voting members of that committee.
Okay, I'm not sure that's a friendly amendment, and I'm going to turn to the clerk on that. My understanding is we deal with one recommendation at a time. So procedurally, unless I guess the mover and seconder are prepared to accept that as a friendly amendment, we're going to have to deal with one at a time on these. Okay, so I will look to the deputy mayor first. Deputy Mayor, are you prepared to accept that wording or requirement as a friendly amendment?
I'm not, but I'd like to offer some comments, but if I can't, then I'll just leave it as I'm not.
I think for now, we'll just deal with the threshold question, which whether or not you'd accept it. So based on that, then Councillor Doherty, I think we have to proceed then with the amendment that's on the table, and we can't, we're not able to amend an amendment. So, we'll, that's how we're going to have to proceed here. Sorry, Councillor Jeffrey, and there was one other card, I missed it. Who had their card up beside Councillor Jeffrey? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So I guess along the same vein as Councillor Doherty, but without an amendment, speaking to the deputy mayor's amendment, how do we ensure putting this voting in place? Because it's important, like many of the things we do, be it county, AMO, FCM, that you have to wear that other hat to make those votes. So the BIA is critically important in terms of the input into some of the decisions that have to be made at the Heritage, but they also have to be able to make the decision or make their vote count for what's best for Heritage, and not necessarily always from their position as a BIA member, if you can understand what I'm saying. So I guess, how do we protect against that through the deputy mayor's amendment? And I guess I would just maybe ask him to speak to that a little bit as to how he thinks that will be overcome with his amendment.
Okay, I'm gonna let the deputy mayor comment, but I'm gonna pass it over, I think, to Clerk Thomas, because this is a consideration that we run throughout our committees. When you are wearing two hats, what is the governing consideration? And I'm going to let the clerk speak quickly to that aspect of it, and then I will look to the deputy mayor for his comments.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. To address that question, that's one of the items that are contained within the general amendments regarding duties of members. So what is being proposed there is that the members actually do represent their interests and opinions, and not that of the agency or organization, unless the member has express authority or knowledge of the specific matter on behalf of the BIA, or in this case, the BIA, I should say. The concern with that is that unless the BIA has provided some general parameters in which that individual is to vote from, there is not enough time from the distribution of the agenda for the Heritage Committee for the BIA to convene and have a meeting to establish their own position. So we made sure that it was clear that that is how that was going to be set up in the future, because there has been concerns regarding this.
All right, and Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Part of me feels that this conversation should actually be in camera. I think that, I mean, if we want to have a conversation about qualifications and individuals and what it is we want to see in a committee, then that's perhaps where the conversation should be had. Failing that, I don't necessarily disagree with the spirit in which I think Councillor Doherty and Councillor Jeffrey have spoken. And I would maybe just use my own self as an example, and that is that I think, and I stand to be corrected, and others can disagree with me, but I have a great appreciation for heritage, for architecture, and for art. However, the art that I appreciate may not be the same art that others appreciate. And I'm not a fan, for example, of the Group of Seven. However, I appreciate their talent, and I appreciate the influences in which they have had on the Canadian landscape as it relates to art. And therefore, I think when we look at heritage, I think that there is value in offering different opinions, different viewpoints. And I think that somehow we're having a conversation that is somewhat being lost in the fact that if we're going to isolate and speak to one, either position or representation of an organization, then maybe we should be having a broader conversation about the role of this very specific committee, because I think it is very unique to the others that we have that do, and they all do tremendous work for our community. And that is that they are bound by governing acts through the province, et cetera, but they sway a tremendously great influence in the direction as it relates to the core of the district. And I think that part of the role of having representation, and specifically a voting member from the BIA, is to provide a bit of a counterbalance, to be able to say that, yes, heritage is important. In fact, it's been recognized. We're well aware of that. And to be the first community to have such a designation is something to be cherished. But at the same time, when we look at the economics of today versus 15, 20 years ago, they're very different. When we look at the economics of Main Street as it relates to the competition of, say, the Western Shopping Node or Barrie or Owen Sound or Newmarket, it's very different. And I think that it's good to have various perspectives brought to the table that not only take into account the bricks and mortar of heritage, but also maybe add a different perspective. I would also suggest that members do come and go, and that we should focus on the position as it relates to, do we want a representative? And I suggest that we do want a representative from the BIA that does have a voting capacity, and that as new information becomes available and new technologies are embraced, et cetera, that not only that this individual, but the committee and those who are all on the committee would be somewhat adaptive and reflective to those changes. I will say this, and that is that we continue to seem to focus on one as opposed to the whole. And the concern I have is that, and we are truly blessed, I must say, and I hope I'm not offside by saying this, but we're going in Cameron tonight to look at a bevy of applications, and the wealth that this community has in terms of intellectual capacity, second to none. And my question would be that, as I said, I have an interpretation of what heritage is. I have an interpretation of what art is. It's very different from maybe others. But I'm going to be making decisions, as all of you are tonight, on who we think will be good stewards of that heritage district. But I haven't had a chance to interview them. I'm simply going by a resume. I don't know if they are somebody who would be, and I say this with due respect, a hardliner as it relates to, thou shall not deviate from A, B, and C, or if it's someone who is maybe adaptive and readaptive to the fact that, things are changing, climate is changing, and we need to be much more symbiotic in embracing not only our past, but our future to preserve the district. So I think that the representation of the BIA is very, very specific. They do play an important role, but I don't think that they should necessarily be bound by the specific notion that they must adhere to what's been laid out for the others. Because quite frankly, maybe it's time that we start to look at the role for the others and whether or not that is in current step with what heritage could be in 2021 versus when it was actually put in place as a committee and through the original Heritage Conservation Act. So anyway, those are my thoughts. And I'm putting forward the recommendation that was established by staff to support the BIA member being a voting member. But by all means, it's the will of council, and I'm certainly supportive of the will of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just looking to Clerk Almus, I know there was in the specific recommendations to the Heritage Committee, there's a 1-year pilot project. Does that capture only the non-voting members, or would it capture the voting members? In other words, are we going to be looking back at this in the coming year, or is once we decided this issue on the voting members, then it's complete?
Through your worship, the pilot is for the non-voting representation.
Okay.
Enough, I could just further add, I think the reason, well, I understand the reason why the BIA representative wasn't identified as requiring a heritage preservation or conservation skill set is in the event that there isn't a representative on the board that has a specific skill set. So there could be that that opportunity in place, and then we'd have to come back to council and take a look at then what does that representation look like. So I think that was the background when the original establishing bylaw was put forward.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Councillor Doherty, do you have your card? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. And respectfully to the Deputy Mayor, I disagree with his comparison of appreciation of art versus appreciation of heritage. Heritage, as you have indicated, is governed by a very specific piece of legislation that dictates the procedures by which a district becomes a heritage district, and all of the protocols, standards, and procedures that are in place to advance the interests of a heritage district. So there is absolutely nothing subjective about it.
Okay, other questions or comments on this, on the amendment? Seeing none, and then I will call the vote. Councillor Comey, you want to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, may I just ask the question, please?
Sure, go ahead.
I suppose thank you so much. I suppose through you to the clerk then, it's not clear to me if we're going to hear Councillor Doherty's amendment to the amendment, or we're sort of putting it in brackets right now. I apologize that I'm not following.
Okay, and procedurally, we can't amend an amendment. We can do one amendment at a time. So if where we are, we're dealing with this particular amendment, which is to make the BIA member a voting member. If that gets defeated, then it could be reintroduced with that additional qualification, or we would just go back to the main motion. And I will look to the clerk on this because the wording is fairly broad here. It's accepting the recommendations. Really, it's accepting the other recommendations, and the only issue with the amendment is whether or not the BIA member is voting or non-voting. So I'm wondering if we need to be a little more surgical in terms of the amendment, because going back to the main motion, we will have already approved all the balance of the recommendations, save and except for the issue about the BIA member. So I'm wondering if it should just be that the BIA member is a voting member, and then we would go back to the main motion.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So just to clarify then, Council, what we're dealing with on the amendment is that the BIA member would be a voting member versus the staff recommendation of a non-voting member. So that's the only aspect of the recommendations we're dealing with now. And then once that's dealt with, we will go back to the main motion, which will deal with the other recommendations in the report. So if that is clear, then I'm going to call the vote on the amendment that the BIA member of the Heritage Committee be a voting member. All in favor? Opposed? So that is defeated. So this takes us back then to the main motion, and I'll read the paragraph again, which is, and that council support the recommendations contained herein and enact and pass amending bylaw number 2021-11. So this will then be back to the staff recommendation that the BIA member is non-voting, as well as the other recommendations contained in the report. They're broader than just that. And I see your card, Councillor Doherty, but I had Councillor McLeod going back, so I'll let her speak first and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Doherty.
It's just a point of procedure again, Your Worship, sorry.
Yes. Okay.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
And excuse me if I'm thick as a brick, but if the motion has been defeated as is there not now an opportunity to put that motion back forward with an amendment as perhaps I had suggested relative to the BIA members' skills and attributes?
There is that opportunity, and I'll come back to you. So go ahead, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. My question through you, Mr. Mayor, to either the clerk or the CAO was about sort of a companion piece to this staff report that was passed on February the 16th with regard to the Committee of Adjustment. And I'm just curious to know where we're at on that request for a staff report, since everything else seems to have come through.
Okay. Clerk Thomas?
Certainly. So the request for the staff report was approved as was presented on the 16th. So this is just the piece that was coming back regarding the consultation component. But I am not sure what the time frame was for the report for the Committee of Adjustment to come back. My apologies.
Go ahead, Councillor CAO Skinner, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor McLeod. I was actually just reviewing the operational plan as it had been put forward by the various departments. And we do have that on the plan for within this year, but it's not, I believe, until around the third quarter as it currently sits for the report back on that, but it has not been lost per the request recently.
Thank you very much.
All right. Councillor Doherty.
Yes, Your Worship.
If you have an amendment that you'd like to put on the floor, now's your opportunity.
Yes, and the amendment would be that the BIA member on the Heritage Committee would have voting rights, but that member would be required to have the same qualifications as all other public members of that committee. So an interest in or background in heritage.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Okay, Councillor Doherty, I'm not seeing a seconder for that amendment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so then we're back to the staff recommendation, which is that council support the recommendations contained herein and enact and pass amending bylaw 2021-11. Are there any other questions or comments before I call the vote, council? Councillor Hammond, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to the clerk, I have a question. In looking at this report, I wasn't sure that I saw anything that required task forces to be to be selected in the same way as other committees are. And I'm wondering if that's in here and I've missed it, or if that's something we need to specifically put in here if we want to have that.
Thumbs?
Certainly, Your Worship. I believe that is contained in our volunteer recruitment policy, but I would have to vet that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, council, any other questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So that brings us then to the bylaw, which I think is next on here. Well, we should do it anyway. So the motion is that bylaw number 2021-11, being a bylaw to implement amendments to the governance structure of other committees and boards established by the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood, be enacted and passed this 22nd day of March 2021. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Madigan and Councillor Berman. We've had good discussion on this, so I would just call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to item 9, which is motions. Oh, so you go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could just make one brief comment. I think that this was a lot of work to set out all of the committees and task forces and their composition and their roles. And I think that it was good that council asked for this, and that that we now have a firmer base to jump forward and continuously improve from. So I just wanted to give my compliments for the ask, and my compliments to the clerk's office and the other offices for putting the information together. I feel more confident with the committees and task forces and the listing in one place. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. And we do have one. Go ahead, Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I must take my leave now, and have a good meeting, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care, Councillor. We do have one additional bylaw, and that is that the bylaw to receive, or sorry, motion to receive the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force team. I had this out of order since we brought that matter forward, so I'd like to get that on the floor now. And the resolution is that the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force team survey results be referred to staff for review, and that any appropriate actions be undertaken as soon as practical. And I get a mover and a seconder for that, Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Doherty. Are there any questions or comments, council, before I call the vote? There's lots of great food for thought in there, and so I look forward to staff and our new economic development officer, Brennan Kenny, looking at this and reporting back to us. So with that being said, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. We do not have any any motions on the table tonight. Are there any notices of motion, council? Go ahead, Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I'll read this in for the next meeting, to be on the agenda of the next meeting. Federation of Canadian Municipalities election of the Board of Directors. Whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, represents the interests of member municipalities on policy and program matters that fall within federal jurisdiction. Whereas FCM's Board of Directors is comprised of elected municipal officials from all regions and sizes of communities to form a broad base of support and provide FCM with the united voice required to carry the municipal message to the federal government. And whereas FCM's virtual annual conference and trade show will be held June 1st to 4th, 2021, during which time the annual general meeting will be held and followed by the election of FCM's Board of Directors. Be it resolved that Council of the Town of Collingwood, Ontario, endorsed Councillor Kathy Jeffrey to stand for election on FCM's Board of Directors for the period starting June 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022. Be it further resolved that Council assumes all costs associated with Councillor Kathy Jeffrey attending FCM's Board of Director meetings as budgeted.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. So that will come up on our next council meeting. Any other notices of motion, council? Seeing none, that takes us to item 11 and 11.1, old or deferred business. Is there any old or deferred business tonight? Seeing none, that takes us to item 11.2, other business. And we've had dealings with, we've heard from Foster Williams of the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force items. I have an item on the agenda. So are there any other items before I do mine? Councillor Doherty, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I was hoping to make an inquiry of staff tonight. And this is in regard to paid parking at our various parks in 2021. As we know, we instituted paid parking in the middle of the summer last year. And although we did manage to find a way to accommodate residents, by having their own parking lot at Sunset Point. In the longer term, it's probably not the most elegant of solutions. And I am aware, as we all are, that many municipalities provide parking passes for their residents. And I can think right off the top of my head of the city of Barrie and the town of the Blue Mountains. And we did discuss the notion of doing something like this in 2021. So I just wanted to ask, I guess through you, to Director Farr or CBO Miller, what plans we have in place for 2021.
I think we're looking for a staff report to come back on that, but I will pass it through to Adam. Go ahead, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Doherty. There's an expectation that CBO Miller will bring forward a report reviewing the success of the paid parking program, including consideration of a resident parking pass. We're currently targeting the April cycle of committee and council meetings to present that for council's review.
Very good. Thank you very much. That's great.
Good. Any other business tonight, council? All right, well, I wanted to give an update. As you know, Collingwood's been a member of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative going back to its formation in 2003, and it's had a very busy last 18 months. And the last Tuesday and Wednesday, we held our semi-annual update meeting, which is generally held in January of each year, but because of the COVID pandemic, was held virtually this past week. And so we had very productive sessions actually over the 2 days. We had on the first day, Tuesday, heard from many of our U.S. counterparts. We heard from Congresswoman Marcia Couture, David Burke-Bucaro, who's the Chief Project Management with the U.S. Army Corps Engineers, who's been dealing with the Brandon Dam project to block Asian carp coming up. We heard from Army Corps engineers about the shoreline resiliency projects in the U.S. We heard from Congressman Cedric Richmond, who's a senior advisor to the president and director of White House Office Public Engagement. We also heard from a number of other Congress people and senators. On the second day, we heard from Senator Tammy Baldwin, and as well Mayor Barrett from the US. On the Canadian side, we heard from Chris Biddle, Parliamentary Secretary for Transport. We heard from Terry Duguid, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. He spoke at length about a key initiative, which is the Canada Water Agency. We also heard from parliamentarians MP Brian Massey from Windsor West and MP Carol Hughes from Algoma, Manitoulin. And from the legislative side, we heard from Joelle Boutin, who's an MNA in Quebec, Jennifer French, who's MPP from Oshawa, as well as Toby Bart, who is an MPP from Haldimand, Norfolk. And Haldimand, Norfolk has one of the largest shoreline areas that have been really very badly hurt by the high water levels, with about 100 kilometers. That's caused major subsidence, leading to the closure of 3 municipal roads and affecting 28 property owners. So the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Initiative has been working hard on a number of fronts, and they've been looking at freshwater issues in the Great Lakes for the last 2 or 3 years, dealing with climate change, water levels, toxins, algae blooms, as well as beachline protection for communities. And the St. Lawrence has been working on the same with our neighbors in Quebec, as well as US counterparts. And the initiative was partnered with a Great Lakes Collaborative, one of 5 organizations, and they produced an action plan to protect the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence from 2020 to 2030. And just as high-level statistics, the Great Lakes holds 80% of the fresh water in North America and 20% of the fresh water in the world. So we have an embarrassment of riches here, but we need to be very careful about how we protect that. And we're seeing an emergence of very disturbing issues that are impacting us. And so the 5 priorities of the initiative are the Canada Water Agency, And there is actually a nonpartisan House parliamentary committee that's looking into that with 8 MPs from across Canada. And we're asking the government to invest $2.2 billion over the next 10 years. And that will just barely keep pace with what's been going on in the States for the last 20 years. So we, on our side of the border, have to pull up our socks and get to business down here. Protecting shoreline communities and ecosystems. We've seen the impacts of the high water levels in our community. But as I indicated, there are other communities like Chatham-Kent, which have been hugely impacted. And so we're looking at creating strategies, ways to identify the vulnerabilities, create strategies to mitigate that, and how then you cost them and implement them on a community by community or regional basis. And so in that vein, the St. Lawrence Cities Initiative has struck a binational committee of mayors on shoreline resiliency, and I'm sitting on that committee as co-chair. We've also established a committee on safe water systems. And for those that have been following the news, our neighbors to the south in Flint, Michigan, and other areas have huge issues with lead pipes and lead poisoning, which has led to extreme harms in their communities. So that's another binational committee that has been struck. Reducing toxins is the third aspect of this of the 5-year plan or 10-year plan, sorry, and the 5 items. And we have seen through PFOS and PFAS, I won't try to say what those are, but they are extremely harmful chemicals. We also know about microbeads and microplastics and how they're impacting our community. And Collingwood is part of the Great Lakes Forever filtration system project, and that is of great interest to the members of the city's initiative. So we're pushing that there, but there needs to be a lot of work done and a lot of concerted work done in making sure that our water quality is protected. And we're seeing these microplastics and microbeads showing up in humans now. So it's getting into our drinking water supply and into our food chain and showing up in us. Nutrients and algae blooms. Lake Erie, being a little shallower, about 15 years ago, had a horrendous algae bloom, which compromised the safe water drinking for Toledo in the States. And Canada, with the Thames Valley phosphorus project, has been working very closely with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture and seeing how we can recapture phosphorus or in fertilizer as it gets washed off farmers' fields. We're seeing with the frequency of 100-year storms, the ground's not able to absorb the rain and it's getting washed into our river system and leading to nutrient increases in algae blooms. So we're working on that. Clean beaches and usable shorelines, that speaks for itself. Our neighbors to the east have the biggest freshwater beach in the world. And so we're seeing the impacts of pollution on our beaches and on our waterfronts. And in Collingwood, we know we have the sea bins, and we're looking at other ways to capture waste before it gets into the water. So again, projects that on a micro basis can have big impacts. And finally, with invasive species, the Asian carp has been working their way up. And the dam in Illinois is critical. We heard from the U.S. Army Corps that they're now in the design phase. It's a 3-year project, which will cost approximately $8 million. But when it comes time to actually build the dam, the cost will be in the billions. But the impacts of the Asian carp, if it gets into the fresh lake, into the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence, would be horrendous. They're massive carnivores, and they basically squeeze out all other aspects of the food chain. And in the Great Lakes, there's a $7 billion fishing industry. So it's hugely important for our communities and our economy. As well, we know about Phragmites and mussels, and we're also working with the International Joint Commission on legislation to protect the bilges of the international freighters coming into the St. Lawrence Seaway and through the canal system to make sure that they don't inadvertently bring in other invasive species that can compromise our ecology. So all of this work is ongoing. The lobbying work through both the Ontario government and the Quebec government to make sure that the federal government devotes the necessary resources to this is an important piece of the puzzle. The federal government's telling us they're listening, and with the upcoming election, it's a very appropriate time to be exerting more pressure. So We will be doing that with all the various candidates and parties leading up to this next election cycle. So it's important work they're doing. It's a very interesting time to be involved with the association. It's gone through some organizational changes in the last 2 years, I think, which have really streamlined, no pun intended, but made us more effective, I think. And we've got a policy analyst both in Canada and the States working with us to lobby governments. And so it's been a very productive time. It was a great meeting, and we have our annual meeting coming up in August, end of August in St. Catharines. And we're hoping that that meeting will be conducted in person. Any questions or comments, Council? Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor McLeod.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. It's an incredibly important work that's being done at that, and is something that our mayor inherits with the position, and I think it's important to carry on. I remember back to former Mayor Terry Geddes and the work he did. But I'm embarrassed to say I've never asked, is there a line item for your activities with the Great Lakes City Mayor's Initiative? I know right now it's virtual, but going forward, I know at FCM we're beginning to speak about hybrid and the potential of personal board meetings again. So going forward, I was just wondering if this is something that's been overlooked in our budget, or I overlooked it and didn't know that it was there.
Oh, that's a good question. And my understanding, with the exception of 2019, when it was brought forward into my personal expense budget, it has been handled through the water budget because it is a water-related board. But I have been speaking with Treasurer Quinlan, and we're looking at bringing it forward as a budget line item. I know there are efficiencies, I guess, in covering it through the water department because it is a water-related issue. But I think for transparency, it's something that should show up regardless of which budget it comes out of.
Okay, thank you. Just as long as it's being covered, because I think it's important that outside of all the other things that you have to do, that we get represented there. And so it's great work. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to what you were talking about regarding the Asian carp and the $8 million design phase, and then I missed what it is thought this dam is going to cost, because it's the Illinois River and the Chicago River and the Mississippi, yes, all of that. And as a fisher, I'm very interested in these issues, and I just how much is that dam going to be? And
I'm told the cost is going to be in the billions when they build the dam, and it's not just simply one dam. There's a series of redundancies that actually call the population before they hit the actual dam, and they have been going through massive capture and destroy programs, and it's been in the hundreds of tons that they've done it over the last years. So my understanding, it will be in the billions of dollars. I don't have the exact budget. I guess they'll know that better as they work through the design phase. But my understanding right now is that the plan is that will be paid by the U.S. government through their initiative, working with the U.S. Army Corps.
Terrific. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, Council? Seeing none, takes us then to item 12, and 12.1 is our in-camera item. Recommendation. Whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore, be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to 1, the security of the property of the town or local board, item B. 2, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including town or local board employees, item A. 3, the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, item B. And 4, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, and that is item B. And the items for discussion are A, committee and task force appointments, and B, servicing allocation framework. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Comey, and Councillor Berman. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. It's now 6:25. So why don't we meet in camera at 6:35? Or sorry, that's 5:35. No, it is 6:35. 6:35. So we'll meet at camera at 6:35. Yes. All right. Thank you. There will be, look to the clerk. Will there be a rise and report today, Sarah, just for our press if they're watching?
If we do come forward with some recommendations for the appointments, there will be a rise and report, and the appointment bylaws passed for those. So we will be going live once we do rise in the event that happens.
Okay. So for those from the press, there will be a rise and report today. And thank you very much to all other viewers tonight. So I'll see council back at 6:35.
And just a reminder to all council, it's this same link for the in-camera meeting.
Councilor McLeod, is that you clearing your ears?
Okay, you're live.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. All right, council, we need a motion to resolve in open session. The resolution reads, be it resolved that council rise from in camera and return to public session at 9:55 p.m. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berman, Councillor Comey. We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we have a series of bylaws to confirm the appointments. What I'll do is read out the bylaw, and then I will ask the clerk to please fill in the names for me. So the first bylaw is, be it resolved that bylaw number 2021-12 being a bylaw to appoint members to the Accessibility Advisory Committee be enacted and passed this 22nd day of March 2021. Now, I think maybe we were leaving that one to the side and deferring that to the next meeting to allow you time to contact, or are we going to name the one individual?
I think we were going ahead with the one individual.
Okay, so and it is Aaron Wright. Aaron Wright. So we are appointing Aaron Wright to the Accessibility and Advisory Committee, and that is moved by Councillor Berman and seconded by Councillor Comey. You're the fastest, you guys. You got to wake up. So I will call the vote then. All in favor, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. The second resolution is, be it resolved that bylaw number 2021-13 being a bylaw to appoint members to the Collingwood Heritage Committee be enacted and passed this 22nd day of March 2021. And Sarah, could you please read in the names of the appointees?
Sorry, and this is for the Heritage Committee.
Heritage Committee, yeah.
Is Kathy DeRuiter and David Jeffries.
Kathy DeRuiter and David Jeffries. All right, can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor McLeod and Councillor Doherty. I'll call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. The next bylaw, be it resolved that bylaw number 2021-14 being a bylaw to appoint members to the Museum Advisory Committee be enacted and passed this 22nd day of March 2021. Sarah, could you please read in the individuals?
Yes, Your Worship. Ken Mayer, Michael Maloney, and Allison Hunwicks.
Thank you. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor Doherty. I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2021-15, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee, be enacted and passed this 22nd day of March 2021. Sarah, could you please read in the names of the successful candidates?
Yes, Your Worship. Hannah Parrish and Justin Jones.
Thank you. I get a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Comey and Councillor Jeffrey. We'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Next bylaw, be it resolved that bylaw number 2021-16, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Affordable Housing Task Force, be enacted and passed this 22nd day of March 2021. Clerk Almus, I think there's 9 names to be read in there.
Yes, Your Worship. They are Doug Linton, Gail Mikolenko, Iona Tuff, Jack Vanderkoy, Kira Laguerre, Kelly Caldwell, Mark Shibanidi, and Robert Voigt. And Nancy Essen.
Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Hamlin. I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously, and that's an important task force, and we wish those members well as they get into the grist of that matter soon. And I think the next bylaw is the confirmatory bylaw, and be it resolved that bylaw number 2021-17, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held March 22nd, 2021, be enacted and passed this 22nd day of March 2021. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Oh, you had your hand up, the Clerk Almus.
Sorry, Your Worship. I didn't know if there was any conflicts that need to be noted on that last one.
Oh, sure. I can advise that I recused myself from the voting for 2 candidates on the Affordable Housing Task Force pursuant to Section 7 of the Council Code of Conduct, as they were very helpful to me in my previous campaigns. So I abstained from voting for those 2 members. And I don't know if there was a third on that particular item. No?
Not a disqualifying interest.
Okay, all right. Thank you for raising that. So the record will show that.
Sorry. So did you, was yours, sorry, just for confirmation, I know that it's late. Was yours disqualifying interest? Did you want to separate the 2 names to vote on that for?
I had the same interest for both, and it was a disqualifying interest under the Code of Conduct, non-pecuniary, but I think there was a fair apprehension of undue influence and bias, so I removed myself from both candidates, voting on both of those candidates.
Okay, confirmatory bylaw, my apologies.
No, thank you for pointing that out and clarifying. So I need a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Comey and Councillor Hamlin, all those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we'll be looking then for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. All in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. A busy night and a productive one. So enjoy what's left of it. Good night.